You know, when I was a kid, I loved hunting for cheap VHS tapes that were absolutely stuffed with classic cartoons such as Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, and Popeye the Sailor Man. I'd rummage through those bargain bins, pushing aside the VHS tapes that I already owned, just searching for something new. And then one day I stumbled upon a Superman VHS tape. I had never seen a Superman cartoon before, but for just £1, I couldn't pass it up. I rushed home, I slid the tape into the VCR player and pressed play. What I saw felt like a secret discovery. This cartoon was old, very old. The picture was grainy and the sound even worse, but I was completely entranced. It wasn't the Superman that I knew. It felt different, almost like I had unearthed something forgotten. And that was my first encounter with the Fleischer Superman cartoons from the 1940s. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Up in the sky, look! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's Superman!
Now, Fleischer Studios was founded in 1929 by brothers Max and Dave Fleischer, and they were a powerhouse of animation responsible for Popeye the Sailor Man, Betty Boop, and other beloved characters. Now, unlike their biggest rival Walt Disney, who focused on talking animals, Fleischer Studios specialised in human characters, making their work feel distinct. And Max Fleischer wasn't just an animator, he was an inventor. He created the rotoscope, a technique that allowed animators to trace real-life footage, frame by frame. This led to an incredibly fluid, lifelike movement, and nowhere was this technique more effective than in the Superman cartoons, adding a realism rarely seen in animation at the time. In 1941, Paramount Pictures approached the Fleischer brothers to produce Superman shorts. Now, already overloaded with work, they didn't really want to take on another project, so instead of outright refusing, they made what they thought was an impossible counteroffer. They asked for 4 times the budget of a Popeye cartoon. And to their surprise, Paramount Pictures negotiated, still offering a massive sum of money per episode. Shocked but thrilled by the resources available, the Fleischer brothers agreed, and production began. Now, one thing to remember. Superman had only been around for a few years at this point in history. He first appeared in Action Comics #1 in 1938, and the first Fleischer Superman cartoon was released in September 1941, just 3 years later. This was Superman's very first time on the big screen, in his very own show. Before this, Superman had already found success on the radio with The New Adventures of Superman, which ran from 1940 till 1951. Now, one key element carried over from the radio show was Bud Collyer, who reprised his role as Superman. He brought a unique vocal shift to the character. When voicing Clark Kent, his voice was soft and reserved, but when voicing Superman, it became deeper and commanding, giving the hero a distinct presence.
This looks like a job for Superman.
Lois Lane was voiced by Joan Alexander, who also played her in the radio show, maintaining continuity for the audiences. Bud Collyer's performance solidified him as a definitive Superman voice for an entire generation, much like Kevin Conroy became the ultimate voice for Batman for our generation. Collyer was the Superman fans knew and recognised. Now, these cartoons weren't just animated shorts, they were cinematic experiences. They had fluid animation, dramatic lighting, and a film noir atmosphere that set them apart. Even today, they remain one of the best Superman animated shows ever made. And believe me, I say that as someone who absolutely loves the Bruce Timm animated series, but even that doesn't quite match the visual artistry of the Fleischer Superman cartoons. The backgrounds and lighting were perfectly crafted, giving the shorts a dark, moody film noir feel, and every episode was packed with subtle animation details, such as small facial movements, small gestures, and realistic motion. I absolutely love how Superman moves in this series, not just in action sequences, but in everyday moments. In one scene, Superman brushes his hand through his hair before he takes flight off into the sky. It's such a small, humanising detail, and if you blink, you'll miss it. Whilst in another scene, I noticed that he gives himself a little kick off against the wall to propel himself into the air. In one of the shorts called Mechanical Monsters, Superman is trying to stop one of these flying robots, and he is knocked off and he falls out of the sky. And when he falls, it's animated in such a beautiful way, showing him falling. And he simply doesn't regain himself. He has to actually fall all the way down before he propels himself back into the air. I think what I love most about these animated shorts is that Superman wasn't going up against massive supervillains. He was going up against mad scientists. He was going up against sci-fi robots. He was going up against death rays. Things that you would normally only see in pulpy magazines at the time. And it just really grounds Superman in that era. And I just love him in that point in history. I also love the way Superman flies in these cartoons. It looks really graceful, and that's all down to the impressive animation skills of the animators. It just looks beautifully crafted. And the way the camera looks at the landscape below him and kind of spins the landscape around a little bit gives you that feeling that you're really up there with Superman, that you're really that high up, and it gives you this sense of vertigo. It's really, really well done. And I absolutely adore the way Clark Kent changes into Superman in these animated shorts. These animations made Superman feel powerful but grounded with a sense of weight and physics rarely seen in cartoons at that time. And Superman's design had a distinct athletic look, reminiscent of a 1940s wrestler, and there's a reason for that. The actual live model for Superman was a professional wrestler who was used as a reference for the rotoscoping. His physique, stance and movements shaped Superman's animated presence, making him feel dynamic and realistic. But it wasn't just Superman. Every single character looked fantastic, packed with attention to detail, which made the scenes visually rich. Now, at this particular time in the comic books, Superman didn't actually fly, he could only leap at great distances. The animation team asked if they could make him fly instead, since it would look better on screen, and luckily the publisher agreed, and soon enough Superman was even flying in the comic books too. So in a way, we have these cartoons to thank for making us believe that a man could fly. I really love the musical score for this animation as well, which would have been the theme for Superman at the time before we all got totally took over by the John Williams score. It really does help push the action and the drama along in these scenes. It's so well done. Now, although all 17 cartoons are known as the Fleischer Superman series, the Fleischer brothers actually produced only the first 9 episodes. After that, the Fleischer Studios closed its doors and production was taken over by Famous Studios. And while still beautifully animated, the later shorts had a noticeable shift in tone, leaning more into wartime propaganda.
The War Department goes on to say that during this action, an entire fleet of Axis submarines was destroyed by American dive bombers, affording the troop ships a safe crossing. For the mighty mission, praise the Lord and pass the ammunition.
Certain episodes like Japatos and the 11th Hour depict Superman fighting Japanese spies and sabotaging enemy warships, a stark departure from the earlier sci-fi inspired plots. Additionally, Superman seemed to become more aggressive, punching human enemies, something that he hadn't done before in the first 9 episodes. In one scene, he destroys a bridge with enemy tanks on it, implying direct casualties, a questionable choice for Superman's symbol of hope. The animation quality also slightly declined as Famous Studios moved away from rotoscoping, opting for a more traditional style to cut costs. While still stunning, the later episodes lacked the cinematic realism that made the initial shorts so groundbreaking. Eventually it was realised that making just one of these Superman cartoons cost the same as making 4 Popeye cartoons, and with that, the Fleischer Superman series came to an end. Superman's animated adventures continued in television syndication for decades, but in the late 1960s, early 1970s, National Comics, which later became DC Comics, failed to renew the copyrights for the shorts, and all 17 episodes fell into the public domain. And by the late 80s and 90s, the cartoons resurfaced on cheap VHS tapes, often found in bargain bins alongside old Popeye, Bugs Bunny and Betty Boop cartoons. And that's how I discovered these absolute gems of animation history. And even today, despite some outdated racial stereotypes and wartime stereotypes, these cartoons remain stunningly crafted works of animation, deserving far more recognition. Watching Superman navigate a fictional 1940s world facing off against mechanical monsters, mad scientists, prehistoric creatures and death rays is a true spectacle. This is a refined Superman, the foundational version upon which countless writers have built. The essential Superman. The best Superman.
Speeding bullet. More powerful than a locomotive. Able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. The infant of Krypton is now the man of steel, Superman. To best be in a position to use his amazing powers in a never-ending battle for true justice, Superman has assumed the skies of Clark Kent.